Greetings in the name of Christ and welcome to the Spruce Pine United Methodist Church's online connection for Sunday, February 26th, 2023. Today is the first Sunday in Lent and we're glad that you could join us for this service. We're going to be talking about during this season the questions and underlying questions of who we are and who we are meant to be. So if you will now, please center yourselves and get ready for worship. And may the peace of Christ be with you. Our scripture is Matthew 9, verses 18 through 31. While Jesus was speaking to them, a ruler came and knelt in front of him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and place your hand on her and she'll live." So Jesus and his disciples got up and went with him. Then a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years came up behind Jesus and touched the hem of his clothes. She thought, "If I only touch his robe, I'll be healed." When Jesus turned and saw her, he said, "Be encouraged, daughter. Your faith has healed you." And the woman was healed from that time on. When Jesus went into the ruler's house, he saw the flute players and the distressed crowd. He said, "Go away, because the little girl isn't dead, but is asleep." But they laughed at him. After he had sent the crowd away, Jesus went in and touched her hand, and the little girl rose up. News about this spread throughout that whole region. As Jesus departed, 2 blind men followed him, crying out, "Show us mercy, Son of David." When he came into the house, the blind men approached him. Jesus said to them, "Do you believe I can do this?" "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then Jesus touched their eyes and said, "It will happen for you just as you have believed." Their eyes were opened. Then Jesus sternly warned them, "Make sure nobody knows about this." But they went out and spread the word about him throughout that whole region. This is the word of God, a gift for all people. Thanks be to God.
Have you ever noticed that Jesus asks a lot of questions? And have you noticed that Jesus often answers people's questions with a question? I mean, just in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus asks over 40 different types of questions. Some are rhetorical, some are basic. Some of his questions were like riddles, and some are specific to where it stops us in our tracks. And these specific questions might seem fairly simple to answer, but they're the types of questions we have to answer. We can't refer to anyone else. Questions like, "What's your name?" It sounds innocent enough, but I remember the first time I was called into the principal's office when I was a kid. And that question has serious ramifications on many levels. And so if Jesus asks me, "What's your name?" it makes me wonder, am I in trouble? Does he have an underlying agenda? I mean, what's really going on here? Or when he asks, "Who do you say I am?" I can't turn to anyone else for the answer. You know, we've talked about this here at church before. And this question says a lot about who we really are and what we believe, because this question reveals there are times in life when we must speak for ourselves. Now, in our Ash Wednesday service, we talked about the underlying questions in a psalm that King David wrote after his affair with Bathsheba had come to light. And in the underlying questions, we heard and felt emotions like anxiety, doubt, fear, and worry. In our text today, we see some underlying questions as well. "Please, will you come and place your hand on her so that she will live?" asks a ruler. "Can I get close enough to Jesus so that I can just touch the hem of his robe?" asks an ill woman. "Will you show us mercy, or are you just another one who will judge us?" asks two blind men. Now, the questions we ask Jesus, whether directly or indirectly, and the questions Jesus asks us point to one main question: what do we believe? Because what we believe shapes us. Our faith, thoughts, actions, behaviors, and our viewpoints. And we see this in our text because there are 4 stories that highlight what we believe and how we act or react. In the first story of the ruler, we know the motive for him coming to Jesus. His daughter died. But we don't know the motives, plural, behind him coming to Jesus. They're 2 different things. Matthew reports that a ruler, a general term, comes to Jesus after his daughter dies. But if we do a little research, we see that this story is also told in Mark's and Luke's gospel. And in both accounts, the ruler is a leader of the synagogue named Jairus. And it seems odd that since Matthew's gospel is written for a Jewish audience, that he wouldn't include this detail. And although I prefer to believe the best of people, I have to wonder about the motives behind this ruler's actions, especially if it is Jairus or another synagogue leader. Because throughout the Gospels, we hear story after story of the religious leaders' animosity towards Jesus. They point an accusatory finger at him and constantly question Jesus' authority because he is a poor, uneducated nobody. He isn't like them among the Duke Divinity School elite educated class. So, is this synagogue leader coming to Jesus a sign of confidence that he believes what Jesus teaches, in spite of what his colleagues believe? Or does he come to Jesus out of desperation? Has he spoken to all the right people and done all the right things, but to no avail, and now comes to Jesus as a last resort? Either way, Jesus responds to this ruler's underlying question, and not the question of "Will you come place your hand on my daughter so that she will live?" I believe Jesus goes even deeper than this to the ruler's underlying question of, will you offer God's love in spite of who I am and the reason or reasons I'm here? And Jesus does. He and the disciples get up and go with the ruler. And then the story gets interrupted by an unnamed woman who is doing her best to sneak around through this crowd in order to steal a miracle from Jesus. And this woman not only has a physical affliction, but also a social one. Because according to the Jewish law, all those with abnormal physical infirmities are considered unclean and must remain separated, isolated from the rest of the community. And she risks quite a bit to be in public. And now, I don't want to take anything away from this woman because of what she's been made to endure, but I want us to consider what's at stake by her interrupting the story of the synagogue ruler's dead daughter. For whatever reason or reasons, the unnamed woman is convinced that Jesus has healing power. Maybe she's heard the story of the man who was condemned, lived chained to a rock in a cemetery, but now is healed and whole and is back among his people. Maybe she's heard about Jesus healing a man who was paralyzed, or how he was able to calm a storm. We don't know how she came to believe that Jesus has healing powers, but here she is, probably all covered up to hide herself, sneaking up behind Jesus and touches the hem of his clothes. And I love how Cornish Methodist pastor Mark Guy Pearce states that when Jesus turns around and speaks to her, she goes from nobody to somebody, to everybody, because of Christ's mercy for her and all of us. And I hope that we all feel great that she was healed, physically and socially, because she's endured quite a bit for a long time. She's been physically ill for years. She was labeled unclean by her community and not allowed to be a part of it. And the hopes she must have placed in doctors, only to have them dashed again and again. But do you realize that because she touched Jesus, that according to the Mosaic law, she technically made Jesus unclean, and he should have isolated himself for a prescribed time period until he would be considered clean again, which means, according to the law, he shouldn't have gone to the synagogue ruler's house. He wasn't supposed to be in public among people who were clean. But he continues on to the ruler's house, where the fourth and hidden story of what we believe is revealed. As Jesus arrives at the house, he first encounters the professional mourners, people who are hired to aid with the grieving process, flute players and those who wail in sorrow. And Jesus tells the crowd to leave because the girl isn't dead but asleep. And although the word sleep was a euphemism for death, the crowd shows its true colors by their reaction. They laugh at Jesus. And know this isn't some uncomfortable giggling to break the tension of the moment. This is sarcastic laughter meant to mock Jesus. Because they believed that Jesus could do nothing to change the situation, they used the weapon of ridicule. They had no hope that what Jesus said was true. They believed the laws of nature and the power of group mentality, but had no faith in Jesus' message. And after healing the ruler's daughter, and word of this spreads throughout the region, we're introduced to two others who follow Jesus, seeking something from him. These blind men, similar to the unnamed woman, are dealing with a physical infirmity as well as being social outcasts. They're considered unclean and aren't a part of the community at large. So they ask Jesus for mercy, something that probably not too many people have ever extended to them. And Jesus asks them a powerful question, a foundational question of our faith. Do you believe that I can do this? And they answer in quite a strong way. Not just yes, but yes, Lord. They recognize that there's something different, something more about Jesus. And after Jesus heals these blind men of their physical ailment, and here's a parenthetical side note, we assume Matthew is referring to physical blindness. But afterwards, he tells the men to make sure no one knows about what just happened. And what do? They went out and told people throughout the region about what Jesus did. And why wouldn't they? They were blind, and now they can see, and they'll be welcomed back into community again. So it's a good thing, right? Well, consider this. They were quick to call Jesus Lord, but not so quick to listen to him and do what he asks of them. Don't tell anyone. And on a side note, how many people today call Jesus Lord, but don't do what he says? But what if they didn't tell anyone? How would we ever know of this amazing story? Well, that's a good question. But what if Jesus actually didn't want anyone to know about this? To which we might wonder, well, why wouldn't Jesus want people to know about this? Could it be that Jesus tells people not to say anything about healings and miracles because that's all we'd believe about him? That Jesus is a worker of healings and miracles and nothing more than that? Because Jesus is so much more than just a miracle worker. And whether we know the motives behind all these people who sought out Jesus or not, what we see is that Jesus interacts with each person as somebodies, as if they were the only ones. Jesus interacts with each one personally, face to face, away from external influences. And he does this with all of us. And everyone will come face to face with Jesus and his questions one day. And when we come face to face with Jesus and his questions, we have to answer them. No one else can do that for us. We have to come face to face with what we believe or don't believe. And we have to stand on the strength or weakness of our faith. And so how we answer Jesus' question, it's important because what we believe matters. It makes a difference in our lives and in others' lives. But just because we believe and have faith doesn't mean that everything will always go our way. But note this, without faith, nothing can happen. And there is a saying that nothing changes if nothing changes. In other words, unless we're willing to change, to be transformed, things will stay the same. And a big part of change and transformation is knowing what we believe. In other words, who do we follow? What relationships matter most to us? What and who do we move towards? What and who do we move away from? Because of what we believe, what do we need to pick up or let go of, and so on? Because what we believe directly influences our actions and reactions. Interestingly, when Jesus offers sight to the blind men and tells them to make sure no one knows about it, they immediately went out and told everyone. Throughout the Gospels, we read stories about faith that is weak, ill-informed, or based on preconceived notions about Jesus. And here, we see that in the midst of their belief is a blatant disregard for what Jesus tells them. And yet, the miracles remained. And this is good news because it means that we don't have to wait until we're perfect to approach Jesus. We don't have to wait until we're giants in the faith. We can come to Jesus just as we are, without understanding perfectly, without a complete grasp of theology, and even from our positions of disobedience and mistakes. Today is the first Sunday in Lent, our 40-day journey towards Jesus' cross and ours. And Lent mirrors Jesus' time of temptations and trials in the wilderness. Lent is a time of self-reflection where we ask questions about our beliefs, thoughts, motives, and actions. And that's why during this Lenten season, we're going to examine the questions we ask and underlying questions we have too, about Jesus, ourselves, and what we believe. And we're going to discuss what these questions reveal about who we really are and who we're meant to be as disciples, followers of Christ. Because all of us approach Jesus with our particular wants, needs, and viewpoints. We all have our own understanding about who Jesus is. And that's a big question we have to answer. Who is Jesus to us? What does he mean to us? And Lent is a good time to ask some tough questions of ourselves. Questions based on these stories. Like, what areas of our lives are dead and in need of new life? What hopes or dreams have died? What relationships seem like they have no hope for resurrection? Or where do we need healing? Do our thoughts or even our faith need to be restored? Who in our community needs healing so that they can be a part of our community again? And what parts of our church need to be healed? And to what or who are we still blind? Do we see our true identity and purposes? Are we blind to the realities others face? And do we pay attention to where God is showing up in the world? And these are a lot of questions. And they reveal that we're not just people with questions. We're people with answers as well. So as we seek the answers to our questions, let's allow God to show us how and where we can step in as the answers to prayers people are seeking. Amen. Thank you for connecting with us here at Spruce Pine United Methodist Church today. We hope you got a real blessing from being here. And if there is a need that you have, please contact our church by phone or email or social media. We would love to be able to help you in whatever way we can. And for those who are regular members and attenders and supporters of the mission and ministry of the church, as always, we say thank you, because we are in this together. We can't do this alone. And so we have 4 ways in which you can financially give to support the ministries of the church. The first is here in person during our 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock services. You can also mail your contribution to the church, and that address is 11090 Highway 226 South here in Spruce Pine, North Carolina, 28777. If you live locally and want to bring your contribution to the church, you can do that during normal office hours, which are Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Or if you prefer to do it online, you can go to our website, which is sprucepineumc.org, then click the Give and then the Donate Now buttons, and it's a safe and secure website. So we have begun our 40-day Lenten wilderness journey. We've just taken a few steps. And we've looked at a few questions, and the underlying questions to let them reveal to us who we are and who we're meant to be. So this week, don't be afraid of the questions, and don't be afraid to bring up the underlying questions so that God really can work on the areas of our lives that need some attention. So don't forget that our weekly announcements are coming up right after this. We hope you have a great week, and please join us again next time. Have a great week.